Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your hats because we have a dynamo joining us today. Meet Sam Drauchak, the co-founder and chief process officer at Truvle, where he's on a mission to revolutionize the way businesses operate. From financial services to digital media, Sam has worked his magic across a wide range of industries, helping businesses simplify and supercharge their processes using cutting-edge business science. That's not all. Sam is a published author with his book, Becoming a Conscious Business, shaking up the business world by exploring the efficiency of biological systems and how to apply them to modern businesses. Talk about being disruptive. Leading the charge at Truvle, Sam is at the forefront of innovation, helping organizations achieve peak efficiency in their business processes and energy flow. He's developed the Truvle Mapping Language, or TML, a universal process mapping language that's become the gold standard for enterprises worldwide. Sam, I'm so excited. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I do the big flyover on kind of your background and your experience, but the audience will connect more if you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are today, and why what you're doing is important to businesses right now.
Absolutely. So for me, I was a student of sciences originally. And then through happenstance, I fell in love with process improvement, process engineering, everything process. So marrying my love of science and process led me to this process science domain of expertise. And I originally was in consulting, and then I didn't really see an opportunity to fit consulting in the way I wanted it to when I was at sort of the big companies. So I eventually started my own consulting company. And then for my own consulting company, where I had less constraints and I could experiment more, I determined that there was a great market fit, because why it's important is we're digitizing so heavily now. Like, why now? The whole world is becoming more digital, and process work is becoming increasingly relevant in that sense, because we can't just walk into the office anymore and look at what everyone's doing. We have to have better process tools and process controls, because we can't see most of what we're doing around the world. We can't see a virtual work environment. So I was really trying to take what was come before and retrofit it for a newly digitized marketplace. A lot of the process science methods we use, that was the reason why it was important. So I've been consulting and having great, basically, results in the consulting space. And what leads me to today, Truvle is a software company that's truly trying to automate the success we've had as process consultants and bring those tools to market so that smaller and medium businesses who really couldn't afford consulting services can now use that process expertise, bring that process tooling into their own businesses. So we're hoping to really scale that way. And that's my entire professional career in just a minute or so.
That's absolutely fabulous. So I am a process geek of epic proportions. My consulting practices align, right? We want to have the right people doing the right work, and then we enable with technology. People plus process times technology equals growth and scale. And so looking at what you're building and actually taking something that for so many businesses, understanding their processes for you and me is like foundational. It's fundamental. How can we run anything without them? But so many small and mid-sized businesses work in the mindset of, well, this is the way we've always done it. And that is the recipe for a painful journey. So talk with the audience a little bit about the impact of really digging into process and what it means for a business.
Sure. Digging into process, in a way, the way I define process, it's everything going on in your business. So a lot of times you start foundationally, which is, what is a process? A lot of people think, oh, it's just bureaucracy, it's just standards, it's just stifling constraints. And that's really not what it is at all. It's really the heart of describing what your people are doing. And like you mentioned, people plus tech enables a process design or a process intention to come to life. Why is it so important that companies are doing this work right now? Part of it is because we can't just rely on what came before. There's not the same market cycles that there were even 10 or 20 years ago, where you could make a good process and you could let that thing run for a long, long time. There's so much more adaptability and evolutionary forces in the marketplace today that if businesses want to stay relevant and they want to stay profitable, they have to be able to change. And change is process work. When you talk about changing a business, you have to understand your process. You have to understand how your process is going to transform, and you have to understand all the tools and methods to make that work efficiently. Because if you're not willing to change now, you're going to be left behind, not in 10 years, in 6 months, in a year. The cycles are shortening. So the demand for businesses to become more adaptable is becoming so intense. And that's fundamentally process work. So I'll start there.
And so it is everything, right? Anything that is done in a business that is done more than one time is part of the process of that business existing. When you are bringing Truvle into an environment, and I may be blending parts of your journey, sorry, but as you're looking at clients and they're bringing in Truvle, how is that enabling them to understand their ecosystem better?
Sure. So it's not blending at all. In fact, the Truvle tool is right now, it's focused on process mapping. Eventually, we would love it to become a full process consultant, like your digital process consultant. But the biggest thing, whether you're doing the work through a consultant or manually, or you're doing it through the Truvle tool, is you have to write down your as-is process first. It's impossible to know where you're going if you don't know where you are right now. And businesses, a lot of times, they either don't want to do it because they know it's a very painful exercise, or they don't think they need to do it because they feel like they have some internal view of what their process is. But the reality is processes are very complex. And if you really haven't written it down and documented it in some way, you're not going to be able to analyze it, and you're not going to be able to make good decisions unequivocally. Like, you're just going to make bad decisions. So the start is always documenting your process. And where Truvle comes in, we're trying to bring that learning curve down and make process mapping more accessible. But it was the exact same language and methods we use as consultants, but we're just trying to bring those tools so that there's more accessibility there.
And so, a point in there that I want to reiterate just because it's so impactful, and we sort of speak the same language, and I will geek out and go in there, but I'm trying not to for the audience. A process doesn't actually exist if it's not written down. And that's a really important place to start, because just because Sam and I work in the same company and we do the same job, if we don't have it documented and we aren't doing it the same way, right? We're not repeatable, we're not scalable. And when I win the lottery, whoever comes in to do my job is probably going to fail because they don't actually know what it was that I was doing. So the point that Sam made, right? It is not really a process until it's written down. And yes, it's painful, but it is the most important first step in understanding what's going on, is documenting as is.
Yeah, you have to. There's no other way to work with it. And even you could be listening to this and being skeptical. Well, like, I know what's going on. I could describe a process to somebody without writing it down. Process data is very dense. And that's something that everyone struggles to understand. If I told you, describe what 10 people are doing right now, how would you use words to do that? There's not really a strong way to communicate what's happening in multiple places at once simultaneously. There's a time issue, there's a density, a complexity, a dependency issue. The only way, in my opinion, is to draw these process pictures. And it seems silly, but a picture is really worth 1,000 words. If you can't diagram the process, you can't really start to articulate using human language the complexity of a live system where multiple people and multiple technologies are interacting to create a product or service. It's very difficult to have a conversation about it otherwise. It's just guesswork if you can't document it properly.
And without having the documentation as a point of reference, how you're talking about it will be different every time you talk about it, because you don't have that baseline point to come back to. This is a start, this is a decision. As you are, from your consulting experience for what you're trying to do with your clients with the Truvle solution, you're now in the entrepreneurial space. As you were building the company and going to market, what were some of the obstacles and roadblocks and challenges that you had to work through?
Sure. The biggest obstacle, and one I'm still working through today, is that nobody understands process. It's the biggest problem. It's a very intangible space, and it's a very complex space. And if I ask 50 people, sort of, the theme of this conversation, what is process? Define it. You'll get 50 different answers. So it would be like saying, well, how do I make a company that sells peanut butter and jelly sandwiches when no one knows what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is? They know they have problems, but they don't quite know that they need this product or this service in this part of their ecosystem. And I think that's been the biggest challenge that I even hit early on in my consulting days. And I spent years articulating my message and trying to be able to communicate, oh, you think you have this problem, but it's actually a process capability issue, or it's a process understanding issue. And when my ability to do that as a consultant grew, I was able to sell more work. I was able to get a lot of momentum. But now, without selling in a consultative basis, you have a software product and you're trying to build a website that has that conversation with people so that they can connect and understand how this tool can help them. And I'm starting again from ground zero. I'll tell you honestly, it's the same challenge. It's a challenge of articulating what is process? What is a process problem? What is a process capability? Why do all companies need this? Where does it fit into what you're trying to do? It's a tricky conversation to have, and not a lot of people can just connect with it immediately. Like, I need a sandwich, or I need this, or I need that. It's tough.
And what the pain is so prevalent because whatever that source of pain is, they're experiencing it on an ongoing and recurring basis, but they don't understand the root cause well enough to understand that it's process or lack of understanding process. Working with clients in your career and in your journey, oftentimes process root cause issues masquerade as people performance issues. Will you tell us a story about something in your, in your experience where you had to navigate that difference to get it to the real problem is your process doesn't work?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's what you're describing is almost every situation I run into. It's very easy if you have a problem to blame your people or blame your technology, or sometimes blame both. But the people and technology are only coming together as far as a process design tells them to come together and combine to create a certain outcome. Again, that's the triangle I always reinforce to people is you have a design, a process design, and you have to have people in tech to do it in real life. So when most people think, I have a people problem, to your point, an example could be, I have two roles that my process design says, you do A, B, and C function, you do X, Y, and Z function, go. And then both roles fail because those functions that the process told them to do are not actually aligned. They're not the right match for a particular skill set. It's not that you have a people problem. The people have the capability. It's that the process design, the way you configured the roles, the way they are supposed to interact, somebody made a misstep there or a miscall. And that happens all the time. So that's really separating when you have a process issue versus when you have a people issue. Because I believe, even in the course of my consulting work, most people want to be productive. They can be upskilled. They can be upleveled. I rarely ever run into a true people problem. It's because people are not given either the technology or the process scope or continuity for them to be successful. And a lot of times they're measured on bad process. They're incentivized on bad process. There's so many factors there, but rarely will you ever get a pure, this is a people problem. It doesn't usually exist. It's most of the time, it's a process problem.
I would be so bold as to say 98% of the time, root cause is at the process level.
Yep.
And especially if you think that you have a technology issue, right? Because the technology truly can only do what we've asked it to do. And if the process was poorly designed, the output's going to be poorly designed.
I totally agree. And it's funny you say that too, because it's the same on the technology side. Yeah. Almost like you said, 98% on people, it's like 100% on the technology side. You can take a technology tool and you can ram it into your organization and blame it for all your problems. Mm-hmm. But truly, technology is there to be configured and taught and instructed. And in a way, technology is like a baby. You have to give it very clear instructions. You have to assume it has no capability unless it is a reflection of the process instructions you give it. So typically, if you're struggling with your technology, again, you're struggling with process. You're not struggling with the tech. The tech is world class. I know you've bought SaaS products that are in the top 10 for every category. It's not that they don't work. It's they're not working for you because there's a process gap.
Yeah, because you don't know what you actually want it to do for you. You haven't been able to give it, ask it to do the right things.
Yeah, Sam, if you hire a person, that's just saying, if you hire a person, you don't know what to tell them to do. You're going to experience the same thing. It's the same thing with hiring a system. If you don't know what to tell it, it's not going to work.
Absolutely. I've seen more technology implementations fail because I didn't know what they were trying to enable, whether, the people, the process, whatever, right? It was the Cadillac solution and they had no design to give it to perform against. And then everybody hates it. With Truvle, what you're building, as you see this going to market and making an impact, what are the future opportunities? How is this changing and disrupting the status quo inside of business? What do you see on the horizon for businesses when they really start to understand and leverage their process design?
Sure. My grand vision and what I see is a more process-centric future. And what I mean by that is most companies, if you reduce the barrier to entry to documenting your processes first, that's what Truvle's first problem we're trying to solve. So that documenting processes becomes easier, it becomes more approachable, it becomes less costly and less time intensive. It means that more people will engage in process work. Because if my career has been any insight into what's going to happen here, the need for process work is increasing dramatically. And when people engage in it properly and they build the muscle, that's it. That's the only thing they'll say or think from that point on. They become more process-centric people, process-driven leaders. It's the first conversation you have. What is the process? What are the problems of the process before we move into any sort of solutioning, any sort of transformative work? So if you look at the vision for Truvle, process mapping is the first step to enable a more process-aware culture. Let's just put it that way. And when you have that, then the next step is naturally, well, now let's analyze all this process data we have, because we haven't really had high quality process data sets. And then all of a sudden you open up a whole ecosystem. And that's Truvle's grand vision, right? Which is you first document, you first collect good process data. Then you can analyze that data. Then you can inform better decision making. And all of a sudden, all of these really crazy tech projects and reorgs and all the things that businesses struggle with become less daunting, become more informed by process data. That's the future we're trying to enable. And the future that I think will come, the hard way or the easy way, it's really your choice.
And one aspect of that you're talking to without calling it out explicitly, right? Process is not finite. It evolves, it changes, and continuous improvement and challenging and questioning, is the process effective, is critical to long-term success inside of a business. So we've spent a lot of time in this conversation at that beginning, right? We have to have the process documented to understand what it is. But over time, it will change, and it is important that it does, because how you're delivering today will more than likely not serve your clients or customer base 6 months from now, 6 years from now. So it's not a once and done effort. This is something that becomes part of culture. You become truly process centric.
Absolutely. Yeah. And part of that is it's the same problem we keep coming back to, which is if it takes me a month to build process documentation and it's stale after 3 months, it's not viable, because the processes are changing so rapidly. They're not even like you're choosing to change them. They're live. It's a living system. All businesses are living systems. And like you say, processes are constantly reacting and evolving. So we have to condense the ability to measure them. That's essentially what we're talking about when we talk about making process documents. If I can measure my processes in a day, all of a sudden it becomes more palatable to measure them every month or every quarter. So it's a lot of times we're just talking about bringing down that cost so we can experiment more. And you're absolutely spot on, which is if we can't get this part right, we're never going to be able to get our hands around it, because it's always changing and it's changing faster and faster.
And I think it's a really good point to sort of wrap up on, right? We have to know where we begin, because the rate of change is getting faster and faster. And every type of change that influences the business, whether it is an economic downturn, whether it is a new product or service that goes gangbusters, right? Each one of these types of change impacts how that process functions, how it performs, and whether or not it should continue. And that is a part of it that we didn't actually touch on, but right, sometimes processes must be retired, just like technology. We outgrow them and they become outmoded. Sam, if people are interested in this conversation that we've started, where's the best way for them to find you and learn more?
The best way is Truvle.com, Truvle.com. And that's where we're doing all of our process mapping and our process tooling. So you can reach out to us there. You can find our LinkedIn contacts. And I'm the only Sam Drauchak around. So you can also feel free to reach out to me online, on LinkedIn, anywhere you can find me, just typing my name in, and I'm happy to talk process anytime.
Absolutely great. For the audience, all of the links will be in the show notes, so it's easy enough for you to find it. And the first and most important step in this entire process is documenting your process so that you can evolve and grow with it over time. Audience members, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Every single week, one lucky listener that posts a review on iTunes will win the grand prize drawing, a $15,000 private VIP day with Lisa Levy. And be sure to head over to disruptandinnovate.com and get your free copy of Lisa's gift. And join us on our next episode.